Welcome to Haunted Mississauga 2020. This is Heritage Mississauga's 19th annual Haunted Mississauga evening. But, due to these challenging times, this is our first ever virtual Haunted Mississauga tour. First and foremost, we wish everyone well, and thank you for joining us. This year, our evening brings us to Dixie Union Cemetery and is set in the time frame of 1840. And we have a riddle for you to solve tonight. Who is the worthy settler? The story of Dixie Union Chapel and Cemetery is a fascinating one. Several early settlers gathered at Philip Cody's Inn in early 1808 to discuss establishing a church and cemetery. Philip Cody donated land across the road from his tavern for the cemetery and church to be built. The cemetery began in 1809 and is the oldest established cemetery in Mississauga and our city's only site which predates the War of 1812. It is believed that only about one half of burials in the cemetery are marked by visible gravestones. The first attempt at building a chapel on the property was thwarted when a falling tree broke foreman Absalom Wilcox's leg. Construction was delayed again during the War of 1812 as many men enlisted with the militia. The first log chapel on this site was finally completed in 1816. It was agreed that the three Protestant faiths, Anglican, Methodist, and Presbyterian, would use the chapel at different times, making it a union, not a united, church. The congregations reached an agreement for use. Anglicans worshipped at 9:30 a.m. on Sundays, Methodists at 2 p.m., and Presbyterians at 7 p.m. Over time, other congregations formed and also came to use the chapel, including Baptists, Lutherans, and Congregationalists. Each had their own day and time of use for the building. In the fall of 1836, construction began on a new stone chapel. The opening of the new chapel was delayed by the rising political tensions and the rebellion of 1837. The chapel was completed in 1837, but was officially opened in the spring of 1838. Over its many years of use, this little stone chapel has been known by many names: Fountain Hill, the Indian Chapel, the Stone Church, Christ Church Sydenham, and Dixie Union Chapel. Sometime prior to 1900, the exterior of the stone chapel was covered in stucco. The building, which last saw regular service in 1922, underwent extensive repairs between 1917 and 1925. Of the founding congregations, the Methodists, now the United Church, were the first to leave, building a new church of their own in Cooksville in 1844. The Presbyterian congregation built their own church immediately north of the cemetery in 1910. And the Anglican Church built their own church, St. John the Baptist, next door to the old chapel in 1870. From the early 1930s until 1955, St. John the Baptist Anglican Church utilized the old chapel for Sunday school classes, at which time a new church hall was added to their building. Since 1955, it is believed that the old chapel has only seen occasional use. The deed for the property, dated 1816, was transferred to 3 trustees by Philip Cody, each of the trustees representing one of the Protestant faiths. The first trustees were John Silverthorne, Alan Robinette, and Daniel Harris. As of January 2015, the City of Mississauga assumed legal title of Dixie Union Cemetery and Chapel.
My name is Annie Farr, and I was born in England in 1807. Together with my husband, Joseph, we came to Canada, settling here in Dixie. In 1829, we bought the old inn and tavern across the street from Philip Cody. Although the locals still call it Cody's Inn, we have run it for over 10 years now. Our inn is the meeting place for the community, where matters of importance are discussed and decisions are made. We insist that violence has no place within our walls. Our inn is a place where all voices are heard and weighed. I remember a few years ago when the community gathered at our inn to discuss building this new chapel, and there were concerns over the cost that would be carried by those who lived here. There was much disagreement until the worthy settler spoke, and a decision was made to move forward with a new church building. And look what we have built, a true Union church. We look around at all our neighbors and the growing communities of Cooksville and Dixie, and we see a promising future, although it will also probably bring an end to our little inn. Jacob Cook has just built a large new hotel, the Atlantic Hotel, and we've heard that the Kennedys are planning to build their own new hotel soon. Now that the troubles of the rebellion are behind us, and with a new school and a doctor here now, we can feel that changes are coming, but the future is bright.
I am Andrew Gage, and I was born in Stony Creek in 1802. As a youth during the War of 1812, the American Army occupied our house and property during what most call the Battle of Stony Creek, or as I like to refer to it, the battle for my home. I remember the shouts, the screams, and the sounds of muskets firing as we were forced to shelter in the cellar. The roughly 3,000 Americans didn't really give us much of a choice, but it was understandable because we were kind of the enemy in their eyes. Luckily, we were not in the cellar for long, as Lieutenant Colonel John Harvey came with about 700 men from Burlington Heights, and through the cover of night defeated the American forces. After the battle, our house was occupied for a while as a field hospital for both American and British soldiers. But enough about the war, let's talk about other things. 9 years ago I met my wife, Mary, the love of my life, during a church service at Palestine. I have always been interested in the affairs of the community, although I must say politics are quite a bore to me. I feel at times politicians are more talk than actual action. I prefer church and school as the anchors for a life well lived. I am inspired by the worthy settler and the example of a life well lived. I hope that these lessons will be learned by my own children, and that they endeavor to make the world a better place for their having been here. I often think of the changes a single person might make, and often contemplate the good works of my cousin, Reverend Peter Jones, amongst the indigenous Mississaugas. War shapes us, but so does education, faith, and a belief in goodness of others. I see the challenges around us: alcohol, intolerance, lack of schooling, just to name a few. It would be easy to go astray, as many have done. But I also see the opportunity to build something here, and what knowledge and a good, proper education could mean to our community and its future.
My name is Amos Wilcox. It is a famous name in these parts, but I am not related to the worthy settler. I was born in 1793 in New York. My father, Isaac, served with a Loyalist regiment in New York during the American Revolution, and he came to Canada in 1796. When I was 15 years old, my father and the rest of my family returned to America, but I decided to remain here and chart my own course. My desire, even from a young age, was to own my own property and be beholden to no one. I enlisted during the War of 1812 with the 2nd York Militia, and I was at Detroit, Queenston Heights, Black Rock, and Stony Creek. I carry the medal I received with me at all times as a reminder of the extraordinary things that a person can do when one sets one's mind to it. The rewards of that service enabled me to marry and purchase my own farm here in 1819. The call of duty and loyalty to the king are not idle words. They are a way of life. I stepped forward again during the ridiculous rebellion of late and did my part as captain of the local militia in attempting to track down those rebels. Some of the local boys regretted crossing my path, I tell you, and were soon locked up for their efforts. I know there's a strong sentiment of support for the reform cause, but there's a fine line between speech and action that should not be crossed, even by the son of one so esteemed in this community. I see bright things for the future of this community that we are building, but we need to be diligent in the rules and values we keep in place to guide the common generation.
Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Mrs. George Shunk. I was born Sarah Pellet. My own family and my husband's family are of Pennsylvania German origins, and we were married in the German Lutheran Reformed Church. We live with my husband's parents, Johann and Magdalena Shunk. They were born in Pennsylvania, but decided that prospects were better here. They regale us with stories of their parents and how they were descended from German nobles. Sometimes I do wonder about that, but they have certain mannerisms and we don't want for anything, so there is some truth to it, I suppose. Plus, Magdalena's maiden name is Kaiser, which is such a strong German name. I know that everyone fears being on Magdalena's wrong side, and just between us, I do as well. She is a force in this community, and she expects me to carry on in her footsteps in the raising of my own children, George Jr., Elizabeth, Lydia, and William. Sometimes I wish I had more of a say in their raising, but I must respect Magdalena's wishes, since she is a noble and all. Of course, she relies greatly on the respected counsel of the worthy settler, Reform and Methodist, and makes no apologies for either. My parents and my husband's parents saw to it that we were all educated and well-spoken. There was no need for uncouth and deplorable manners in life. We have a station to uphold, which allows us to regularly afford the doctor's attendance in hopes of keeping any of the evil illnesses away. Our families both donated money and labor to the building of this fine little chapel. Magdalena won't soon let you forget that, and neither will I. It's such an important part of our life and the lives of many others in the community. Oh, I think I hear Magdalena calling me, so I'd best be off now. She doesn't like to wait, so farewell.
My name is Sarah Leonard, and my parents are named Hannah and James. My mother was born over the ocean in England. She came to Canada with my two aunts. My father was born here in Dixie, and I have been told that his mother was Indigenous. I never met my grandmother, but I would have liked that. I have two older siblings, Louisa and Joseph. They are much older than I am. Louisa fancies that Silverthorne boy, George. which I think is silly. The worthy settler tells great stories about clearing the roads and cutting back the forest. I can hardly imagine what it must have looked like here, but I love hearing about the way it was then. I love hearing those stories and imagining myself back in those times. My mother says I have a vivid imagination and I am a dreamer. I do not mind that. I create an imagination world and I love to visit the cemetery here and climb the trees. It is a marvelous place. Being the youngest, I can pretty much do as I please, although my brother does like to tell on me. My father works with Mr. Silverthorne over at his mill on the river. I like to go there and listening to the adults. My father tells me that this is no place for me, but I like hearing stories. I often visit my aunt at the inn across the street and listening to the older folks talk about the early days, except for Mr. Amos. He's too stuffy.
I am Aaron Silverthorne, and I was born in 1790 in Niagara, shortly after my family arrived there from New Jersey. My older brothers Joseph and Thomas all lived nearby, with Joseph owning the Cherry Hill farm. All three of us served with the militia in the War of 1812, where Thomas was wounded. I was a sergeant, and I saw battle at Detroit, Queenston Heights, and Lundy's Lane. I was on the field with the 2nd York when our beloved General Brock fell. I will carry the medal I received with pride for the rest of my days. Although I know that my service was important, I marvel at what my wife Mary had to cope with in our long absence, not to mention the worry of the war itself, and having seen Thomas come home maimed. For 6 months at a time, she managed the home and the farm by herself. With my brothers and myself away and my parents elderly, there was little help to be found. Little children would have complicated that further, but we did not welcome our first of 5 children, Francis, until after the war was over, although I know that Mary assisted with my nieces and nephews. I am forever grateful for our indigenous friends who called on Mary and my sister-in-law in our absence to ensure their comfort and security. It is the example set by the worthy settler and my parents that give us a model to live by. That is, to be of solid character, good judgment, shrewd business, to work hard, and to take care of one's family. Yours, as ever, Aaron Silverthorne.
Hello, my name is Anne, and I was born in 1792 in St. John's, New Brunswick, to Cornelius and Mary Anderson. My father was a loyalist from New Jersey. He received a land grant in 1793, but we didn't arrive here until 1795 when I was 3 years old. I vaguely remember the long trip here, by boat and by wagon. Oh, how I longed for a proper bed. Our family grew over time to include 10 children. As the second eldest, I helped to care for my younger brothers and sisters. In 1811, when I was 19, I married Samuel Mercer. He was older and very well established. We bought a large farm along the back line, which they now call Burnhamthorpe, after Lord Nelson, of course. My dear Samuel, a veteran of the War of 1812, died in 1830. We had 11 children together. My eldest Thomas was 18 when Samuel passed, and my youngest John was just over a year old. Those were hard years. But the members of this little church all looked in on us, which helped to ease the burden. Thomas capably took over the farm, and my other older boys, Samuel Jr. and Seneca, in part guided by the advice of the worthy settler, also helped to maintain the estate. And I get to keep it as long as I don't get married again. Our farm is well regarded, and people have started referring to us as the Mercers of Burnhamthorpe. We have a large brick house, which is my pride and joy, which was lovingly built by my husband a few years before he passed. This church has meant so much to us over the last 10 years. When the call went out for a new church, I made sure that my Thomas helped with the building of this stone chapel a few years ago. Oh my, is that the time already? Well, I have to go, but thanks for chatting.
Oh, we could talk about the past, but reminiscing does not capture my fascination. I would much prefer to talk about the future. I'm all about the future. My name is Jacob Cook, and I was born in Pennsylvania in 1776. Unlike most of my neighbors, I am not a farmer. I'm an opportunist. Originally, I applied for and won a contract to carry regional mail from Toronto to Ancaster, where I lived for some time, and to distribute local mail from these two centers to the good people of my township. I was awarded this lucrative contract because I am located in the center of the township and I manage an inn, the Atlantic Hotel, where the residents come to pick up and send their mail. My stagecoach service runs daily between my hotel to Brampton, Cheltenham, and Georgetown. Life is full of obstacles, but as I said before, I call myself an opportunist rather than a businessman. With the experience I've gained carrying the mail and the trust I've earned from Her Majesty, I'm planning to extend the carriage of her mails far east to Kingston and west to Goderich. As for setbacks, my wife Anna and myself have already buried several of our children, including little Jacob, who was barely 2 when he was taken, and recently William and Pizzarius. They have all left us far too young, but I am thankful that Mary, Anna, Henrietta, Hannah, and Miles, my eldest boy, are thriving. Others in the community have suffered setbacks, but they continue to look to a brighter future. When Belcher's blacksmith shop burned last year, we all helped to rebuild it. A community with a blacksmith is farther ahead than one without. Anna and I will soon be blessed with another child, and I'm sure he'll arrive safely, thanks to the help of yet another community member and my good friend, Dr. Crew. I'm sure his expertise will be a great asset. Also, I am so encouraged by the example of the worthy settler who managed, in fact, to raise 7 children and see them all established, although young Alan may be away for some time after the dreadful rebellion mess.
My name is Sylvia Robinette. I was born in 1800 in York. My father Alan and my 2 uncles James and Thomas moved our family to Upper Canada in 1791, away from Pennsylvania following the Revolution. We are of French Huguenot ancestry, and my father was born in Holland. My father began to acquire properties along Dundas Street, and our family has done very well thanks to his shrewd judgment. My family also runs a tannery and potash works along the Etobicoke Creek, not far from the Silverthorne mill. My father was a trustee of the chapel in the early years and a trusted friend of the worthy settler. We have a large family. I am the second youngest of 8. 2 of my brothers, Alan Jr. and Thomas, served in the war against the Americans, where Thomas was badly wounded. I was only 13 when Thomas came home to recover from his wounds, and I can still clearly remember the strain of that horrible time. My mother forbid any others in the family taking up arms, and would not allow any of my family to consider standing with the rebels in 1837. I married in 1821, but it was short-lived. I'm now living with my sister Mary and her family. Her husband Daniel Custed is the brother-in-law of Aaron Silverthorne, and our families are very close. I hear Aaron and Daniel discussing the affairs of the community, and I am encouraged that so many people of such varied backgrounds have chosen to settle here. We have American, German, Dutch, English, Scottish, and French all mingling here, all members of our church. We have even just welcomed a black family from Virginia. The spirit of the Union Church offers a place for everyone.
I am Dr. William Poole Crewe, and I was born in England in 1797. I sailed to Canada as a surgeon with the Royal Navy in 1833. I received my medical license in Upper Canada in 1836, and Jacob Cook convinced me to establish myself here in Cooksville, which I did. I take my oath seriously and believe that everyone should have access to medical assistance when required, and I will not back down from anyone who might suggest otherwise. Illnesses come and affect us all. Diphtheria, smallpox, cholera are blight on rich and poor alike. We combat these things together with knowledge and with medicine, and now that the troubles of rebellion are over and peace has returned, I look with bright optimism on the future of my community. My wife, Sarah, often laments over those years of unrest. I can hope, along with my brother Masons, that the conservatives and the reformers can find a way to mend their torn ways, and perhaps those that fled from the rebellion can return home and help to chart the path toward, as allies, friends, and neighbors, we would all do well to follow the path set by the worthy settler.
Gia Quich. I am Frances Miles. I was born in 1790 in Cleenish Parish, County Fermanagh, Ireland. My parents were Robert and Elizabeth Morris. Growing up, although we rarely wanted and were comfortable, we were not wealthy. My father has been astute in acquiring property, which aided us greatly. I married my husband Andrew in 1816. We ventured across the ocean in 1827 and landed in Boston. My husband, myself, and 4 young boys between the ages of 10 and 3. We welcomed another boy, my darling William, in 1828 while in Boston. My husband did not find the prospects in Boston appealing, and I will admit that I did not enjoy life in that city. So we came to Canada in 1832 and were welcomed here with open arms. Until we established ourselves, we were sheltered by the worthy settler. We bought our own farm here, which we called Springbrook, in 1833. We all did our part and pitched in with the building of this fine chapel a few years ago. It did the heart marvels to see everyone running to and fro, all working together. My son Robert has just gotten married, and we established them on a farm in Trafalgar. My next boy James has his sights set on getting his own farm soon too. It is good to see the morals and work ethic passed on to the next generation.
I am Absalom Wilcox, and I have had a long and eventful life. And despite the loss of my leg, I have much to be grateful for. I was born in New Jersey in 1766, and I have had a lengthy career as a stonemason. My wife Barbara and I have lived long enough to see our 7 children grown. I have helped to build 2 churches here. I have lived through the events of the American Revolution, the War of 1812, and recently the Rebellion of 1837. My son Alan went into exile, and yes, I proudly sheltered those rebels in need of my help. I defy anyone to question my judgment on that matter. Are we not all people deserving of each other's care? I look around at my friends and neighbors here, many of whom are of a younger set. For myself, I marvel at the pace of the rising generation. Change is coming, and the community is growing. I do hope that it is in the spirit of cooperation that charts the path forward from here. Young and old, it took the whole community to build this chapel. And the one before it? This chapel represents a union of faith, of character, of intent, and of community. There is something to be proud of for a community that is built in a manner that seeks to uplift and provide opportunity. Such a place rewards merit above the old and decaying order. The spirit of this place represents something of great worth to the future of this community.
My name is Stiles Stevens, and I was born many years ago in Connecticut. Although I am an American by birth, I am a proud loyalist by choice. I came to this country in 1796 and settled here in Toronto Township in 1807. I have seen this land grow from wilderness covered in vast forests to the community we have today. In those early years, I knew many of the indigenous Mississaugas and exchanged my skills as a carpenter for supplies I might have needed. As a carpenter, I have had a hand in shaping this place and have worked on many houses. Many people today do not remember those early years, when there were few roads and they were mostly impassable. The worthy settler and I may not agree on many things, particularly in light of the rebellion, but we are both here at the beginning and we can find common ground when we speak of those early years. If the upheavals of the American Revolution, the War of 1812, and the late rebellion have taught me anything, it is that finding common ground is essential. Men like Jacob, Amos, and Andrew may represent the change that is coming. I wonder if they will find that common ground. I was a lieutenant in the militia in 1812, and I took my oath seriously in the defense of my home. I understand now that not everything is so clear. The concept of this Union Church is significant, showing that different faiths and creeds can find common ground for the greater good.